Can modern digital technology outshine traditional craftsmanship? A black and white inkjet print versus a black and white darkroom print. Which one will give you the ultimate print quality? In this video, I will answer those questions, and if you stick around to the end, I will show you a direct comparison of an image I made inkjet printing and darkroom printing. Welcome to my channel. My name is Matthew, and I am absolutely obsessed with black and white printing. So I'm gonna go over some key differences between the two processes, go over some pros and cons, kind of the impact on the creative process that they make, as well as the final image quality. So let's dive in and see which method comes out on top. And just some of the specifics real quick, I did use an Epson SureColor P600 printer using the quad tone rip, very similar to the advanced black and white mode in the Epson driver. And I printed this on Ilford Gallery gold fiber silk paper. I do believe they have a replacement for this now. I've had this paper for quite a while. It is lovely. Then in the darkroom, I printed on Fomabram variant 111 using Ilford's PQ developer in my darkroom. Now let's just go over some of the inkjet pros first. Definitely one of the biggest pros is just the smaller footprint that it uses than, say, darkroom printing. You don't need a dedicated space per se. Now this is depending on the size of your printer. With the SureColor 600 that I have, it doesn't require a ton of room, and you can set it up in a corner, on a desk, in different places, and it's just really convenient to have. Making inkjet prints, it's just a lot easier to work with digital files printing. So to print with a digital file in the darkroom, you have to basically digitize it into a negative somehow, and that's a more complicated process. But with inkjet printers, if you have a digital file from a digital camera or your scanner, it's very easy to just make a print to the printer. What you see is what you get, hopefully. So once you have a calibrated system, meaning your monitor, your printing paper, and your printer, pretty much whatever you see on your monitor is what should be coming out of that printer. Your final print is not going to be all curled like a fiber-based darkroom print. Once they dry, they curl up. Inkjet prints, they're just perfectly flat, and it's really nice. Now, one of the biggest pros is that it's very easy to edit and manipulate your images in Lightroom or Photoshop or quite a few other image editors. And that's gonna allow you to do the dodging and the burning and the whatever cropping and all these things. And like I said, you'll see what you're going to get right on your screen. So there's no commitment to paper until you like what you see. The print quality off of these inkjet printers is just, it's insanely good. It's quite unbelievable actually, especially if you grew up in the era that I grew up in the late 80s and 90s. You would have never dreamed that we would have printers that could do what these printers are doing, quite frankly. So the quality and the archivalness is really good. You know, though we don't have any inkjet prints from, say, 100 years ago, they have done light testing, and these pigment inks and different inks they've tested on show that they will be very stable for hundreds of years. There's a really, really great range of inkjet papers available, all the way from 100% rag cotton matte papers to Bayarta or like more of a traditional fiber-based print finish. And they're all pretty amazing, and you can find some really good options to fit your images. And lastly, dust is a minor annoyance, not a crippling source of anxiety. Now on to some of the cons of inkjet printing. There can be quite a learning curve involved. Now it can be as simple as using the Epson or the printer driver. Now they have like advanced black and white modes, and those do really, really well. But if you want to kind of take it to that next level and use, say, like a quad tone rip, a rip software or something, and start making your own profiles and your own curves, and you can take this all the way up to having different shades of black instead of the color inks in the printer, and then calibrating that. So it can get very technical and very complicated, though it doesn't have to. Inks and papers can still be quite expensive, and the cost can add up. Primarily the inks, especially if you're having to clean the heads a lot and do different things, they're not the cheapest. Now, I've not done a direct head-to-head cost analysis or comparison, but my gut feeling would be that if you have a calibrated monitor, printer, and paper kind of setup, and you know you're getting like good quality off the images that you see on your monitor, that you are going to spend less inkjet printing than on darkroom paper. For the simple fact that you always have to make some test strips with the paper in the darkroom. So I do think it would be a little bit cheaper to print with inkjet, but it still can be pricey. Now this might be the biggest con for me, is that it's an all digital process. And by that, I mean, it keeps me tied to my computer, or at least between my computer and my printer, like walking there. Now, the more I am on my devices and tied to my computer, my eyes don't like it, my body doesn't like it, my head, my anxiety levels are not as good as if I'm not on these things. So the more I can stay away from my computer and devices, the better off I feel. Though I understand I have to work on a computer most of the day. So adding another couple hours of printing in front of a computer, it's a big con for me. Now, before we get into the dark side of things and compare these two prints, I need you to smash that subscribe button. I'm gonna put up more videos like this and you're not going to want to miss them. All right, on to the darkroom, the pros. There's just nothing quite like working in a darkroom. The experience is enjoyable. It's a very hands-on and tactical way to create your prints. And it's really kind of unparalleled in the digital world. It's on a completely different level from digital printing in that regards. Fiber-based black and white prints are still considered kind of the gold standard of black and white prints. And if you've ever seen a well-crafted fiber-based black and white print up close and in person, you'll understand why. So the image is embedded in the emulsions, which tends to give the image more depth and a sense of feeling, and it can kind of draw you in more so than the inkjet print, which is printed on top of the paper and just tends to look a little bit more flat. Black and white fiber-based darkroom prints, when processed correctly, are extremely archival. So we have a lot of examples of this that have held up. So this is a proven archival medium. This isn't just theory based on light testing. We have an absolute amazing range of papers being printed today, thanks to companies like Ilford and FOMA and others that continue to support black and white printing, black and white film, all analog processes. It's really cool to see the support still there, and the fact that we have great materials available is a huge pro. Darkroom printing is just such a rewarding creative process. The tactile nature of it, going through, there really isn't, in my experience, as much of a reward system going on in photography as much as being able to craft something from start to finish, all analog, all made by you. But it all can't be creative flowers and unicorns. There definitely are some cons to darkroom printing. The main one would be you need a dedicated space. You need a place to actually be able to print these pictures. You need to be able to get it dark. So this can be a little bit of a barrier to entry for some, but those of us that love it figure out how to do it no matter what, and it's definitely possible. You don't need a ton of space. Yeah, if you put your mind to it, you can start darkroom printing for sure, but it is a little bit of a con. Dust. Working with chemicals can be considered a con, though I really enjoy this. I've always loved the smell of the darkroom, but for some it could be problematic. I have developed some sensitivities to some chemicals, so it definitely can be problematic. Usually not an issue if you have proper ventilation. And I would also say that most of the chemicals used are rather mild and not generally harmful. The level of control you'll have is it's more limited than, say, editing your photos in an editing software, especially today with the crazy AI and all this stuff. You're gonna feel more limited at first. But you'll find that the process kind of has its own built-in ways of making things look cool that offsets that. But overall, you have less control. So to answer the question, are inkjet prints better than darkroom prints? Well, yes, in many ways they are. So one of the main reasons being the easier startup and learning curve. It's more accessible to have, say, a computer and a printer than it is a darkroom. In print quality, in terms of sharpness and from a purely technical aspect, they're just a little bit superior in the inkjet realm. But in many ways, I feel kind of the opposite as well. So I feel that darkroom prints have an advantage in other areas over inkjet prints. And I think this is because the key difference for me is that when I edit something on the computer, it's my nature to kind of over edit these things. Everything is so customizable. There's so much you can do that I just tend to over edit by nature. So this can be a real problem as it's very easy to do. I find that a lot of the time that what looks good on like the screen when I'm editing, for whatever reason, it doesn't look as good in print. For example, now if we take a look at the two prints that I made, the right one being the inkjet print, I added some clarity and I did some dodging and burning and added some sharpness and, like I said, a little bit of clarity. And I loved how it looked on the screen, but in hindsight on the print, I'm not as thrilled. And I think it's mostly with that little bit of clarity adjustment, especially when I compare it to the darkroom print that I made. The inkjet print, like I said, I added sharpening and it's very sharp and it's almost too sharp. And that's another thing. Like, I think it looks good on screen. It would look good on Instagram, but on print, it looks a little too sharpened. So it's hard to get these things right. That's not to say that you can't. But for me, it's really hard to judge these things. And now I could clearly lower down the sharpening and reprint it. Now, if I compare this to the darkroom print and what I had ultimately visualized for it, it's much more influenced by the process in the darkroom. I have less control in the sense that I can't see exactly what's going on in real time. And I think that's a huge benefit for me. Let me explain. The paper and the chemicals and the larger light source, these things all have built-in inherent characteristics, right down to the lens. Then the film being used contributes to that as well. They all have their own characteristics, and once they're aligned, they just make a really, really beautiful print that, left to my devices, I might not have done it that way. But then when you see the final print, you're like, wow. Now, if we compare the tones, I used the neutral profile and quad tone rip and feel it's pretty good, but much prefer the tone of the Fomobrom variant paper. Now, this was developed in Ilford PQ Developer, and it's not even toned yet. So once I have the final print made, it will get a selenium tone, which will further increase the depth and beauty of the print. So in the end, I really love how both of them turned out. I think the inkjet print looks amazing. I am still working on a final print of the darkroom print. But here's the thing, once they're framed behind glass, I'm not really sure I would be able to tell which one is which. I would like to think that I can, but I know the average person would have no idea. And that's the thing. That's how good these inkjet prints are. They're pretty amazing. They're a lot of fun to do. The biggest downside for me is that I have to be tied to the computer. However, I do continue to do inkjet prints and learn more about black and white printing. So if this is something you'd want to see more videos on, please leave a comment below and I'll try and make that happen. For now, check out this video on film scanning versus darkroom printing.